I would like to invite Ruben, Saldana, please, to the front. Nuriyah, Shabazz. And I want Ruben to sit right in the middle, please. And I want you to sit here, please. And Catherine Jones. We're kind of doing this Oprah style. I've always wanted to be like Oprah. And I thought because Nuriyah is the age of my daughter, and we got to go have dinner with Ruben and Nuriyah, and her mom, Miss Leslie, we wanted this to be a little more intimate. So what we're going to do is ask this group just questions and let them talk to us. These are the credible messengers. And I feel particularly something about this group because this group feels like a recovery group to me, and you're going to find out why. Ruben Saldana runs Rue Camp and Credible Messengers in Orange County. He's the former leader of what was once Miami and Orlando's biggest street gang. After serving 19 years in prison starting at the age of 16, he created the only youth crime prevention program in the world that trained kids in high crime areas in mixed martial arts for free, outside. And they competed at the highest levels to include Rome, Italy's Olympic Center's first youth MMA World Championship, Africa, Amsterdam, and beyond. With 0 arrests under his watch over 9 years, since creating Rue Camp with hundreds of youth participants globally. And he told me the other night at dinner, I think he said he has 7 teens living in his home. Take that in. This is recovery. He's the founder of the Credible Messengers of Florida and the current consultant to the Orange County Mayor's Citizen Safety Task Force. His current initiatives are hashtag gloves up, guns down, and hashtag wheels down, guns down. So I'm going to just start by asking you a couple of questions. And the idea here is each of these panelists is going to get to talk to us for about 5 minutes. I mean, that's kind of how it's going to go. But Ruben, can you just tell us about Credible Messengers, who you are, who the Credible Messengers are, what they value, and why this program is unique? Now, I have 2 questions for you, so we'll manage our 5 minutes within these 2 questions.
Do the 5 minutes start right now, or is that later? It starts now. All right. So basically, before I answer your question, with all due respect, I want to give a shout out to my people. I don't have any blood family here. I do have them in Orlando, but they're busy with kids right now. I want to give a shout out first to YAP, Youth Advocate Program, for even bringing this panel to my awareness with Ms. Saney. Definitely have to give a shout out to my Paramore family, New Image Youth Center over there. They surprised me by coming out. Miss Shantae, the founder, I call her the queen of Paramore, and a lot of people, if you're in that community on the streets dealing with kids, they will agree with me. You know, she has 30 to 130 kids that I train, but they're with them almost 7 days a week, and she is very unique to the situation in the fact that she's a licensed mental health therapist, or however, you know, the proper names go, doctor, you know, whatever, right? But, and so she has a combination of community people, credible messengers, licensed, certified credible messengers, and you could take me out of the picture and she still has them there, and mental health. So I think this is very unique to what she has going on and very relevant to here. And so I want to thank you, Ms. Shantae, for your service always to the community. 2 more shout outs to Community Life Improvement Center, who has opened their doors to us in the west side of Orlando. We're very close to Pine Hills, of no charge, to allow Credible Messengers to help run and facilitate Children with Incarcerated Parents program. And then I cannot move forward without thanking Mayor Demings gave us a shout out to all the Orange County staff in here, and to include law enforcement and the state attorneys for believing in us and for absolutely not a single vote on investing in the Credible Messengers 2 years ago. And I know we won't let you down. If I was loyal to the streets, I have no problem being loyal to something legit like this where I don't have to worry about wrong things, right? And so Credible Messengers, has anybody seen Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3? Okay, I watched it last night, or yesterday afternoon. And I'm endorsing them, but they don't sponsor me. But if anybody knows the Marvel Studios people, we do need sponsorship. We need help with the kids program. But if you want to know what Credible Messengers is, I promise you, when I watched it, that was Credible Messengers. That was incarcerated children, hurt and abused animals. That was men that were, because they were tattooed up and had all these funky looking dress codes and stuff that were prejudged. But what that movie did, what Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 did, was it went into their childhood traumas of why they became what they became. And furthermore, the story that I got from it was they were given second chances. And when they were given that, that's when they became Guardians of the Galaxy. Right? And so if you haven't seen it, I promise you they don't endorse us. But if anybody knows, we're in Disney, Marvel Studios, all that, tell them, yeah, we're endorsing that, right? But seriously, watch it. If you want to know what a credible messenger is, that's exactly what it is. Somebody who came from a bunch of trauma, who we didn't wake up and say, oh, I'm going to be a killer tomorrow. I'm going to be a gangbanger. I'm going to go rob somebody. We didn't wake up. We came out the womb crying just like everybody else. But traumas caused us to embrace a lifestyle that a lot of times, if not every time, that we were victims of ourselves. And so what we do is, once we have our awakening, we become the poison that becomes the cure. Some of the world's greatest medicines come from poison. And so we utilize our experience, our lived experience, to give back to the kids. My story is not her story. My story is not even the gangbanger story. Everybody has their own story, but what they can do is relate, and they know we understand. And they won't fake it till they make it with us. They already know it ain't gonna fly anywhere.
So when we met and you told me a story of kids over in Orlando circling up outside, dirt in the middle, everybody's packing, carrying guns, and it's a fight. They're fighting for money. Whoever wins gets the money, right? And you talk about appearing on the scene of that and intervening as a credible messenger. And my thought is, what's the difference between an intervention when the credible messengers show up to that situation and maybe if it was a police intervention where police showed up on the scene? What's different?
Well, from a community perspective, what she's talking about is some of the common fights that are going on throughout the state of Florida, everywhere, all over the United States. They're calling it gloves up, guns down, but there's money involved. They're illegal fights. The good thing is they're literally putting on gloves and hashing it out, but they're not doing it in a sanctioned manner where there's medical staff there, where there's good rules. It's illegal. And so some of my greatest fighters got drawn into that because of the money factor, right? As amateur fighters, even in the Olympics, you don't get paid to fight. A lot of people don't know that. And so if the police come in, it's not going to be looked at as what you said. It's not intervention. They're going to say they're coming to arrest us. They're going to break up. They're going to run. And a lot of times they're going to break up and run for 3 reasons. Why? They have dope on them, they have guns on them, and they have warrants. I'm not snitching on nobody. It's common sense, right? My man right here knows what I'm talking about, and anybody from the community knows what I'm talking about. They're not going to run because they're doing illegal boxing, because most of the time, the law enforcement actually respects those type of setups, because they know they have to deal with the shootouts and stuff, and they're like, wow, such, 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 such. So from credible messengers, what we want to do is we want to channel that energy into a legal, good setting, a real gloves up, guns down, where you're not, with rules, where your brain, the safety of your brain is still being taken into consideration from numerous blows, because a lot of times those guys do not know how to fight. They fight like street fighters. And street fighters are more entertaining than pro fighters. Why? Because you have 2 people giving their all for 1 minute, then they're dead. The cigarettes kick in, the weed kicks in, everything else, right? But it's entertaining because wow, they're trying, but more professional fighters, they're evading, like, when they're going to land a big punch, and then you're 12 rounds later and there's a decision. So I hope that answers your question. The credible message, what we do, we take them and we get them involved in sanctioned, legitimate safety fights, or competitions, I'd rather call it.
And then they get connected to the caring adult, which the research tells us that buffering, caring, well-regulated adult, like Ruben, can then care for these children versus punish them. And that would become the pathway to healing. All right, so I'm going to pass it over to Kevlon.
Thank you. Nuriyah, you talk a lot about school and interactions with classmates and teachers, and for a long time being seen as a bad student. What has been your experience when you have felt anger or panic or high level of emotions at school, and how was this handled, and what do you do or your classmates do to cope?
So I was, okay, sorry. I consider myself a lucky child because I did have outlets in school. My SAFE coordinator came to me when I was in 7th grade, and I had that option to go to her whenever I was in crisis or needed something. But for 6th grade, I was more, I had a lot of anxiety, social anxiety especially, and I kept to myself, and it was very hard for me to keep all my thoughts in my head. It was just like everything, I was more focused on everybody else around me than actually learning in school. Hold on, I think my mind's going everywhere.
Well, and I want to remind you that when we talked, you talked about kids like escaping to the bathroom, like that they didn't have anywhere to go. And you remember that? And that school,
Yeah.
tell them about that. What happens to children when they get in an emotional reaction at school? What did you observe?
Well, in 6th grade and beginning of 7th grade, I skipped class a lot. I would just hide out in the bathrooms for as long as possible because that was kind of the only place where I felt like I wasn't going to be bothered, and I felt that I could like finally take a breath because, you know, in a classroom full of students who have all very different personalities, it's hard to keep yourself like level when you hear conversations of these two kids and the fight that's about to happen after lunch. You know, so I know I used the bathroom as a safe haven, and I know many other kids did too, because in 6th grade I used to skip class with my friends. I had one friend in 6th grade. And I would stay in the bathroom with her for like 2 class periods, and then we go to lunch, and then I'd go on with my day.
Okay, so how has Credible Messengers taught you the power of your story?
Credible Messengers has taught me the power of my story by kind of just having me realize that I'm not here for no reason. Everything that has happened to me can benefit other people. And it has benefited me as well because now here I am. I'm on a panel and I'm sharing, you know? And I also, just recently, I have my first mentee. I'm a mentor to her, and having her has really made me realize that I can help her, and I have helped her. And, you know, just having her tell me about her day and the situations at school happened to her and having her confide in me, it makes me feel like a whole new emotion that I've never felt in my life before, and I'm so grateful for it.
Awesome, awesome. Can you talk about the level of respect the program teaches toward girls and women?
Yes, I can. I think that the fighting and the MMA can teach and has taught some of the girls, most of the girls actually, self-defense and realizing that they don't need a guy to always protect them and that they're capable of doing it themselves. And then there's also outlets that are available, like dance or mentoring. For me, it's mentoring, and for my friend in the program, it's dance. And there's just a lot of outlets. And then they can also see people who are in the same situations they're in and see how much they've evolved and how great they've become. Like, they can look up at these mentors and realize, like, you were in my situation and it got even worse for you, but you're still here. It gives them, like, a hope.
And I remember Ruben talking about that you teach the young men to be respectful of the women in this program. Is that right?
Oh, mandatory. You won't hear that B word towards no girl. I mean, we got girls that are kicking them boys behind. Matter of fact, New Image Youth Center, Miss Shantae's kids out there on parent, all the girls stay whooping the boys, for real. It's open Tuesdays, 3:30, 5:30. You think I'm exaggerating? Come on out. Miss Shantae don't. She keeps a public door. The girls stay kicking their behinds. So I don't. If they're doing it, it's under their breath. Yeah, respect. We're old school. Our kids hold the doors open for people. If I see them walk in, I'll snatch them up by this and go hold that door open. Yeah, respect is big. I was raised by a mother and four sisters, so it's definitely big with us with women.
And it's so important because I think we heard the statistics about many men in prison have experienced domestic violence. So they maybe have not experienced role modeling the respect of women, but maybe have witnessed more the abuse of women.
Right. And if I could add to that, one of the important keys, and especially dealing with, I mean, they're going to tell their own stories, but she was in the car with me. We did something in Ocala called Hoods to the Woods. So we take kids from the hoods and bring them to this campground that my partner owns over there. He rescues and trains canines for the police units. And he, on the drive back, I had a lot of the girls with me, and they were openly talking about stuff. And one of them, a 16-year-old, said, "Coach, I don't know a single girl under 14 years old, not one, that hasn't been molested, not one." And Nuriyah said, "I agree," and the two other girls said, "Absolutely." And I was like, wow. So it made me feel good to know that we are 100% about girl and women empowerment, 100%. Yeah.
That's really, really important. And I know that when you talked about the power of your story at the night we had dinner, you mentioned this woman here, Catherine Jones, and that she had really taught you by modeling the power of story. And Catherine, we just want to give you your 5 minutes to tell this group your story and let that be the power in the room.
Thank you so much. At the ages of 12 and 13, me and my brother received the unfortunate distinction as being the youngest children to be sent to adult prison for homicide. It was the murder of our stepmother. It happened the year of Columbine, so it was caught in politics. So at 13, when my crime happened, the why didn't matter. The courts never knew that from the ages of 5 until about 2 weeks before my crime happened that we were the victims of sexual assault by our uncle who lived in the home, a convicted sexual pedophile who should have never been allowed to be in the home. His probation officer came there every week and knew he was there, although he had raped and sodomized a 12-year-old girl. And so I had an interview yesterday, and they asked a really important question, and they said, "Why?" And I said, I can't dignify that with the response because I'm thinking from 37-year-old logic now. And there's never justification or excuse for taking someone's life. But at 13 years old, I didn't realize like the full impact of my decision. All I knew is that I was desperate, that the school system failed, that the court system failed, that the probation system failed, and I was at wit's end. And when I found out that it was also happening to my brother, I said I was going to do anything in my power to get us out of that situation. And so at 13, I formulated a plan to take the life of everyone in that house. I held each of them responsible. Protective services had came into the house. They knew, they seen the indicators of abuse. They told my father he wasn't allowed in the house anymore, and he continued to stay there. And at a moment that I was in the bathroom at 13 years old, and he walked in while I was in the shower and started masturbating, while I cried in the corner, and then he left cents. I believe it was 27 cents on the toilet, like I was some type of cheap whore. And I was his niece. I said, my father and his girlfriend were in the room next door with the door closed. They had already come and told him he wasn't allowed there. He was allowed anyway. So at that point, everyone in that home was responsible. And so at 13, I made the decision that I made, and I went to adult prison. I ceased to be a child that needed protection, that needed healing, that needed nurturing, because according to the state, I was now a convicted felon. I was a murderer, and they put me in a prison full of pedophiles and predators. And so the trauma cycle continued. I was 15 years old the first time I was sexually assaulted by a correctional officer. And it happened more than once. And it wasn't until at the age of 25 that my mentors came in to do prison ministry, Pastor Charles and Betty Williams, that finally somebody seen me as more than a number. They strip you of your identity when you go to prison. Now, they no longer call me by my name. I was an inmate, E186, and they walked into that room and taught a class called Fresh Start, and they became my mentors. And for the first time, they looked at me and said, "You are somebody, and you don't have to walk around with that guilt. You have purpose, you're a leader, you're a speaker, and your story is gonna change lives." And they began to train me. They began to speak life into me. And it is because of those two individuals that I am who I am today. And so I knew the power of mentorship. And when I came home, I had another identity crisis because I was 30 years old. I hadn't even gone to high school. I haven't driven a car. And so I knew who I was as this woman, this change transformed woman in prison, but I didn't know who I was as a free woman. And so then I came home and had an identity crisis, and my mentors helped me through that. I've been home 8 years, and I'm still figuring out who I am as a free woman. And so I came a part of the organization, the Campaign for the Fair Sentence Youth. They're based out of DC. I fight to abolish life without parole sentences for children and other extreme sentences. We have the unfortunate distinction of being the only country in the world that will sentence a child to die in prison for mistakes they made as children. And we should be ashamed of that. Because at any other time we say children need to be protected. They need to be loved. Brain science says we have this unique ability to rehabilitate and transform that adults don't have if the right people are in place to provide the tools and resources needed. And so because of our work, we are now this year at the halfway mark. Over half of the states in the United States have now, because of our advocacy work, banned juvenile life without parole or have none serving. And we are now at almost 1,000 releases of kids that were told they would die in prison that are now home after serving decades. And I have the honor of leading that network and supporting them as they come home, as well as work with corporate partners, because it takes a village. They need jobs when they come home. And so to change their policy, so when they see people like me, they don't see what they see in the media. Murder, no hire. No, I'm a human being, and I need you to see me for who I am. I'm not a sum of my worst mistakes. And so as we've been successful in our advocacy, I started to wonder, what's my next? And I met Ruben. And I am now a mentor to this beautiful young lady right here. Because it was mentorship that changed the trajectory of my life. One person can make a difference. We don't have to be the Oprah Winfreys and the Obamas, and every person in this room has the power with their words, with their time, with their energy to transform other people's lives. So it's an honor to now work alongside credible messengers, to work with the youth that most of society would cast aside, that they don't invest the resources in. I've been the parent that my kid went to Lakeville Elementary School and got totally different resources when they moved, and they're now at Tangelo. I see the difference in the schools. Our children in Ocoee get a lot better resources than our children in Tangelo or Pine Hills or Paramore. And we should be ashamed of that. Redlining is still real. Systemic racism is still real. 80% of all children that go to jail for life, that get sentenced to life without parole, are black and brown children. And it's not because our black and brown children are more troubled. It's because they designed those laws in areas where they know there's a concentration of black and brown children. And so it's our job as a community to fight on behalf of our kids and advocate for our children.
Catherine, thank you so much for telling your story. So when we started the Peace and Justice Institute, stand up with me, Ruben, I remember suggesting that we might call it the Peace, Justice, and Love Institute. And my colleague said, no, Rachel, that'll never happen. But then I was struck at dinner when you said to me, Ruben, what is the mission of the Credible Messengers?
So before I describe the mission, I'd just like to show you what changing the narrative looks like. 1989, I was reading I'm horrible with emails. I didn't read the emails to come here, so I was catching up with the booklet you put on there, and thank you for putting it on there. And I read on there somebody had graduated in the University of Miami in 1989, the School of Law. I had just left the University of Miami a year before that, and at the age of 12, 1989, I was joining what eventually became Miami's biggest street gang, and as well, it was brought here to Orlando. At the same time, 1989. Preteen, and so I haven't wore this. I know I'm dressed funky, and thank God funky's cool these days, right? People are like, I ain't never seen you. I don't wear tuxedos. The news told me 2 days ago when I went to Miss Worrell's thing, yeah, we knew you weren't gonna dress up. I came in because I was gonna go coach right afterwards. And so I haven't worn this in almost 25 years. The last time I wore this, I was sitting in our courtroom facing 2 first-degree execution-style murders. fighting for my life for a crime I still maintain that I did not commit. But I refused to snitch. Because I felt like if I got myself involved in the crime, I needed to do the time. Meaning, if I'm part of the gangbanging structure and I was a leader, then I'm not going to become a fireman and be scared of the fire. However, that's not the discussion. To have a public defender or a lawyer appointed to you is common, right? But to have one that believes in your innocence and pours their heart out to you, when I was found guilty of the lesser degree, we were one step away from freedom. We have 5 or 6 jurors convinced. It was called, in Florida, they call it a jury pardon. 1st degree, 2nd degree, 3rd degree, manslaughter, freedom. I got manslaughter. They call that a jury pardon. And so our state prosecutor at that time, thank God Miss Monique's not here, I cursed them out in the middle of them sentencing me. They had to drag me out. And to have a lawyer come to you and say, please, man, don't do it. We have a sentencing phase. You're still looking at 120 mandatory years, You didn't catch life or death. But I didn't get my freedom, and you know I didn't commit this. Well, this is the first time since that time I just told you about, that my lawyer, I'm seeing my lawyer, Mr. Robert LeBlanc here. I may not have agreed with the strategies of defense, but he did believe in me, and my mother loves him.
And when he cursed everyone out, he was live on court TV.
And when Bob agreed to do this, and he texted me the next morning, he goes, I defended Ruben Saldana. He's on the panel. I don't know if he's gonna hug me or slug me when he sees me. But what I'm struck with, and I do have a wealth of tears in me right now, is this heart and soul of this man. And what Bob said to me that day was, I always believed in Ruben and knew he had a beautiful soul. You have a beautiful soul.
Thank you.
And I honor your work. Thank you to the credible messengers.
And I'll answer your question in the workshop tomorrow, since we're out of time.
Okay, and they're giving a workshop tomorrow, and I'm getting the time. We've got to move on, because we do have, so give them one more round of applause, the credible messengers.